am refreshed. I am ready. I cannot believe that we are on the last day of 2020. Like, my mind is blown that it's already December, that tomorrow is the 1st of January, but also that, like, we made it through this insane year. Like, I literally, like, do you know, when I think back on everything that's happened this year, like, you know how on Instagram and stuff, like, they give you, like, all the highlights of the year and stuff like that. Do you guys realize Tiger King came out this year? Like, I can't believe that, like, that was this year, because it feels like it was 65 million years ago, and yet, like, it was literally, like, earlier this year that we were all obsessed with Carol Baskin and the gang. So I'm just so ready to, yeah, I'm so ready for 2021. I'm tentatively excited that it's going to be bigger and better than this year, although the bar is, like, on the ground, so it can't really, no, I'm actually not going to say that. Knock on wood. I am not going to say it can't get worse. Knock on wood. I'm not going to say that, because the next thing you know, it's flames. The next thing you know, there are aliens, because I feel like that's the next step. Anyway, so today's video is me shooting my top 20 of 2020. I have been agonizing over this video because you guys know I read 200 books this year, and so trying to whittle it down to the top 20 books was a little bit difficult. So today I think what I'm going to do is I've actually just decided to shoot the top 20 fiction books, because non-fiction, I had 5 non-fiction books that I post on Instagram as my favorite non-fiction. I have other favorites, so I think I'll probably try and shoot a best non-fiction of this year video. It probably won't be up until, like, beginning of January, but I'll do that for you guys, because I know some people are really interested in the non-fiction genre. But I had too many fiction books for me to be able to, like, because if I had to include non-fiction, then, like, I don't know how I was gonna get to 20. Okay, so I'm gonna separate this video into, I think, 4 parts now that I'm looking at the stats. The first part is gonna be my stand-up favorites. There are 6 of them. Stand-up favorites of the year, my absolute favorites. The second part is going to be my top fantasy. Part 3 is going to be my top what's the last one? Top YA. And then the fourth part is going to be my top romance. So that's how I'm going to do it, because I was looking at my genres and stuff like that, and I realized that, like, that was the easiest way for me to separate it, because I realized I read a lot of fantasy this year. I also read quite a bit of YA, and then all the books in my standout favorites are the ones where, like, I have 1 or 2 from each genre, and I just couldn't be asked to separate them. So I just thought, let me just pile them together. But they also are just generally my standout favorites. So yeah, let's get into it. Standout favorites for this year. I don't think anybody would be surprised at, like, my top pick of 2020, because I raved about this book for so long after I read it and while I was reading it. But the other 5 in this kind of section are the ones that stood out for me, where I just love the story, I love the characters, the book itself has sat with me, and I either was super entertained, or the characters just stuck with me, or just the writing was brilliant. I just love the story. One of them is one of the ones that was in my surprise favorites, I think, and that's the one where it's one of my favorites, because I honestly was so shocked at how good that audiobook experience was, that, like, anyway. So the first book should the first book should come as no surprise to anybody, and it is Love in Color by Bolu Babalola. This is my favorite book of 2020. It is, I don't even think I need to say it was first of all, also the cover, hello, and that's also why it's my favorite book. But I don't even feel like I need to say much about this book. If you follow me on Instagram, and also when I actually did read this book, I think it was either November or October, but I raved about this book so much. It's a collection of short stories where Bolu Babalola reimagines kind of the classic romantic figures in African, I think a bit of Arabic mythologies. So characters like Oshan and Nefertiti and Shahrazad, those kinds of characters are given, like, a modern twist, and these stories are so fantastic. Oh guys, this book is so good. The first story in this book is probably one of my favorite things I've read this year, and it is the Oshan short story. It was just so beautifully written. It was rhythmic and it was pulsing, and you just got this, like, there's this feeling of being immersed in a completely different world. And I have to tell you guys, short stories are such a difficult form to write, that, like, for her to be able to execute it to to this like absolute like highest level. I am a stan of Bolu Babalolas for life. Now, whatever else she wants to write, I'm ready, I'm in it. So this book is my favorite book of 2020. It's the one that I think everybody needs to read because it is absolutely brilliant. Okay, the next book is one that I read for my book club in January, and I loved this book so much. Actually, I'm matching with it. Hi, it's Patsy by Nicole Dennis Benn. This book, you can see it's like tabulated so much. We read this for book club, and the reason why I loved this book is that it was such a great discussion book because there is so much to unpack in this book. Nicole Dennis Benn really does such a good job of writing about multiple topics, but really fusing them together and really diving quite deep into the discussion around the things that she discusses. And I think it's because she also, I think this book is like 400 pages. She does, I think it's an excellent book. And also the thing I like about this book is that I hated the main character. I did not like Patsy at all. And that for me is such a nice experience when you, I guess not nice, but like, kind of nice when you love a book but you hate the main character, because what it shows is that the writer is able to articulate characters and articulate people's experiences in a way where you love the book even if you personally don't like the person. So Patsy, for me, I just found her to be like so annoying, like deadbeat mother, everything. But at the same time, I understood where she was coming from. I understood the background and the life she'd lived and how the choices that she made, how she made them. Do you know what I mean? So this is also one of those books. Also, this cover is literally everything. I feel like if you have any other cover but this one, I'm so sorry, because this one is literally the best thing ever. Then the next book I also did for book club, also banging cover. It is The Shadow King by Maza Mengiste. Okay, so when I reviewed this book, I know I said quite a few things that were like, this book is not really what it is says it's about. So this book is not, in my opinion, a book that centers women in war. And that's how all the blurbs, all the reviews kind of characterize it. But then when we're in book club and we're talking about this book, I made the point, and someone made the point as well, and we're talking about how if you remove your expectations of this book and you remove what is written in the blurb of this book and you assess the writing and you assess the story itself, it is beautiful. Maza Mengiste is a fantastic writer. So I think this is one of those books where I really loved it. I thought it was such a rich book, and it talked about a topic which is the Italian invasion of Ethiopia and the attempted kind of colonization of Ethiopia, which is a topic that is not something that I'm very familiar with, especially in African literature. Or in African history. It's not one of the civil wars that I'm most familiar with. So I found this to be beautiful because it also taught me something I didn't know. I think I had the same experience as, you know, Find Me by Andre Achiman. Everybody said, oh, it sucks. And I said, no. The problem with Find Me is that it is not actually a sequel to Call Me By Your Name. The Find Me for me is something like a different story. Yes, the characters are the same and it's a continuation of Elo and them's story, but at the same time, it's not. Do you know what I mean? It's a different story on its own. So if you read Find Me and you assess it on its own merit as opposed to reading it as a sequel, in my opinion, you'll have such a better experience. So that was my experience with this book as well. Then the next one is the one I was surprised about, and that's Milkman by Anna Burns. Has to be in my top 20 this year because this audiobook experience, when I tell you, I was laughing the entire time, and it made me realize that I actually have a really morbid sense of humor. But like the narration, the characterization, the way that Anna Burns wove the story together. And the thing is, this audiobook, the person who narrated this audiobook did a bang up job. So this one was one of my favorite audiobooks listening experiences, and it's also a top 20 because I was so surprised that eventually when I read it, I found the story to be engaging. It was hilarious. It was also like oddly like gave me an understanding or history. It reminded me of Dairy Girls, if you know what that show about Northern Ireland and the Troubles and the kinds of conflict between England and Northern Ireland in the, I want to say 80s. So this book, and 90s, I think. So this book definitely top 20. The other one is Love After Love by Ingrid Posord. This one I got recommended by Cindy, Book of Sins, who is the queen of Caribbean literature. And I have to tell you guys, read this book. It's chef's kiss. It's so beautifully Caribbean. It's so beautifully Trinidadian. I love the way that Ingrid Persaud writes. I love the way she steeps this book so rich, so deeply in kind of Caribbean and especially Trinidadian culture and histories. I also love that there is a queer element to this book. I didn't love the ending, but that was just because I'm this person who just like, I always get so frustrated with the kinds of doom and gloom and the always such sad endings that queer narratives and queer storylines seem to have. But this book was beautiful. It was well written. It touched on so many topics: motherhood, parenting, family, lies, sexuality, identity, maid family. I think this is a great book club book because there's so much to unpack and so many different characters, and I can assure you, if you do this for book club, so many of you are going to hate so many of these characters and you're just going to be angry at them, and then you're going to love the other ones. So Love After Love, also the cover is beautiful. So Love After Love, definitely top favorite as well. Then the last one of my standout favorites was American Royals by Catherine McGee. This was just straight up entertaining. It was giving me Gossip Girl, it was giving me Dynasty, it was giving me Princess Diaries. Like, I was just interested from the beginning. Also, I love this cover. I just ordered Majesty, which is the sequel to this book. I can't wait for it to arrive. But I think this one was one of my standout favorites as well, simply because I was just entertained from start to finish. It wasn't particularly deep. I just liked the characters. I just found it like, I don't know how to explain this. It was just vibes, man. Like, I just found it so entertaining. So I was just like, this book is exactly what I needed when I read it. And it was a 5-star book for me. And it was one of my top ones for this month. So definitely had to add this one to my list. So those are my 6 standout favorites of this year. And next we're going to do my top fantasy of 2020. Okay, guys, so fantasy books, best fantasy of 2020. I realized I actually read quite a bit of fantasy this year. To be fair, I read quite a few duds, but I did read some really, really spectacular fantasy series this year and specific standout fantasy books. So the first one, I posted this on Instagram already as my best fantasy of 2020. Jordan Ifueko's Ray Bearer is actual perfection. It is like literally the perfect books. I have no notes. No notes. If you watch New Girl, you know what I mean? No notes. Like, this book is perfect. It is so, the characters are so amazing. The main character, Tarisai of Swana, is such a strong but also such a complex, such a vulnerable character. The storyline, the plot, the freaking like characters, the balancing of the good and the evil. And I love that all the characters that she did are not your typical kind of good versus evil characters. I love the way that especially Deo and even the lady, she kind of balances them, and they're so complex, and you don't have that typical uber crazy villain in this book. And I guess people would say the king might be, but I don't think so, because I think once you read the book, you realize he's a bit more complex than just like your typical megalomaniac villain. And I think this book, it says so much, and it's also kind of touches on the conversation around like gender and like, guys, I just can't rave about this book enough. And I actually can't talk about it properly without giving spoilers, because there is quite a lot about this book that you need to read it to know. I don't want to ever give spoilers because I enjoyed the twists and turns for this book, but I just have to say 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, 15 out of 15. Perfect book. Also, the cover is beautiful for once. We got the better cover because the one from the US is a bit but this one is beautiful. So this book, genuinely 10 out of 10. Love it. Perfect. The next book is a series that I started. Best series I read this year is an Ember in the Ashes, a Fight Sabata here. I have one book. I've read A Torch Against the Night and A Reaper at the Gates. I'm just now waiting for A Sky Beyond the Storm. But this series is perfect. Like, Sabata here, it just made no mistakes here. Like, every character, every twist, every turn, everything was just so rich. I love Leia, but me personally, team Elias till the death of me. Like, Elias is my favorite character in this book, and I just want good things for him. Literally, I just want him to be happy and to be healthy and to have love and to have light in his life. And right now, I'm not sure if that's going to happen, because the ending of book 3, the ending of Reaper, I was just like, no. Now, this book will make you cry. It will make you angry. It will make you like, what the hell is going on here? But it's perfect. Like, I love this series so much. I think it's one of those series that I think everybody should read. I'll do a whole video on this series once I've actually finished A Sky Beyond the Storm, because I really want to talk about it some more. But I love this so much. 5 out of 5. Perfect. The next one is book 2 in the Children of Blood and Bone series, which is The Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. Look, Tomi Adeyemi makes no mistakes as well. This book was fun. It was dramatic. There was lots of twists, a lot of turns, there was a lot of drama. There was a lot of making bad decisions. Like this series is literally full of children making bad decisions, but at the same time you're just like, okay, but like they're 12 and they're expected to literally save the fate of the world. So I just feel like, yeah, and the ending, oh my god, I can't wait to see what she does with book 3, because the ending was such a complete turnaround to the rest of the book that, like, I'm not even sure what's going to happen in book 3. I'm genuinely shook by what's going to happen in book 3. So Children of Virtue and Vengeance, absolutely great, 5-star. I also love this like really cool sprayed spine. I got gifted this book by Exclusive Books, but I love the signed copy. It's beautiful. The next book is one that I was surprised about, but I actually really enjoyed, and it was Daughters of Nri by Reni K. Amayo. I can't wait for the second book, which is coming out next year. I also found this one to be one of those where the story was so kind of unique. It was a different take on the classic fantasy adventure book. So basically these two twins are basically separated at birth, and it's this society where there's this, I think, like a prophecy where the king feels like if these twins come to being, and these kings are the last daughters of a god, they have magic, and the king has kind of outlawed magic, so they're kind of, and then it's basically, you know, like on the Parent Trap, where like all of a sudden the twins like come together and it's just like, oh, what a coinky dink, I didn't know you existed, that kind of thing. But I like both of the characters. I like both of the two daughters. Their names are, I'll tell you now, Nala and Sinai. I like both of them. They're very unique, and I'm interested to see how they interact with each other in the next book, because I think that's when they're really going to start the dynamic between them is going to shift. But definitely, I think this book is great, well written, the story was unique. I really enjoyed this one. And then the last one was A Court of Wings and Ruin. I loved this series. I loved A Court of Thorns and Roses. It's Roses and Thorns. It's Thorns and Roses. I loved this series. I think Sarah J. Maas is a good writer for this series. I will say that Sarah J. Maas generally books are too long. This one was also about 100 pages longer than Need to Be, so that's my main critique of her. But this series, this book, chapter 55, fab, chapter 55, that's all I have to say. But this book is so good. I just found this whole series to be so entertaining. It was complex. The twists that happened in this book, I did not see it coming. Guys, the twist, I didn't see it coming, guys. I was thinking Feya and Tamlin to the death of me. I did not know where this storyline came out of. And this is one of the first times that I've seen a writer completely do a complete 180 from what you thought was going to happen. So I definitely loved this series, and this one was my favorite book of the series. Right, so those are my top fantasy picks, and now we're going to move on to YA. Right, YA. I read quite a bit of YA this year as well. Quite a few standout favorites. I think this was one of those genres that in 2021 I'm probably going to read a lot more of, because I'm finding that YA is one of those genres that it's a great filler. Romance, for some reason, even though I had standout favorites this year, there were a lot of duds. I had a lot of really bad romance books, so I think that's going to be one of the genres that I put on the back burner for this year and just rely on YA to kind of be the books that I read in between the really heavy books, although some of these YA really was like a little bit heavy. But anyway, the first book was, I think, my favorite YA of the year. It was Pet by Akweki Amezi. They are a phenomenal writer. Their work is always so good, and I love the way that they kind of represent trans characters and represent gender non-conforming and gender fluid characters. This book, for me, it was only like 180 pages, but it was just like the perfect morsel of a book. It touched on so many different topics. I loved the storyline. I loved the treatment of the trans character. I loved the way that it was such a by the way. And I also loved the underlying message of the storyline of this book, of how a society that moves beyond kind of racism and moves beyond homophobia and stuff like that, needs to be careful about this whole idea of living in a utopian society and pretending like these things don't exist, and always being aware and remembering the history and remembering the past so that we can have a better future. That's what I got from this book. And I just, yeah, I enjoyed this book thoroughly. Loved it, loved it, loved it. The next one was a book that I did a recreation of on Instagram, and I really, really, really loved that recreation, and you guys loved it too from the response I got. All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. It's more of a YA memoir type of thing because it is kind of a memoir biography, but it is YA in my opinion, the subject matter, and most of the story that he tells is from his younger years, so I would definitely classify this as YA. I love this cover. I thought this was just such a great, I love reading stories about young queer Black youth because I think those are the stories that aren't rarely told, and I would love to see a book like this coming out of South Africa and coming out of Africa and reading about children, queer young people in Africa. So definitely enjoyed this one. The next one was also a queer book that I read. I think I read it last month, and it was Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar, a Bookstagram fave that I really, really, really loved because I loved the way that they kind of spoke. It was kind of centered on friendship, on identity, and also I love how it spoke to the idea that just because somebody is queer, just because your group of friends is queer, doesn't mean that they're not problematic, and how we all have to assess ourselves and make sure that we are staying on top of our biases and making sure that we are not perpetuating bad ideas. So, and I love the love story as well. I loved the end, who Felix ended up with. I loved the way that the love story in this book was like, oh, it was just beautiful. I love that as well. The next book is one of my favorite books of the year, was Full Disclosure by Cameron Garrett. It is one of my favorite YAs of the year simply because it's such a multi-topic YA book. It's sexuality, it's sex, it's friendship, it's HIV because the main character has HIV and AIDS, but she has queer parents, and it's this whole, and she's bisexual as well. It's this whole and I like that because I think Cameron Garrett executed it well. I will say that sometimes people who do multi-issue books don't execute them well because they get distracted and they can't finish what they start. This is not one of those cases. Cameron Garrett does such a good job of really, really touching on all these topics and weaving them together to create one full picture. And I just found it, also the banter was great. The love story was great. I loved Miles, loved everything about this book. But I think my favorite, okay, I said it was Pet. Was it Pet? But I think actually All the Things We Never Knew by Liara Tamani was my favorite YA. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I read it last month. This book, it was giving me Love and Basketball vibes, and I love that movie. It was giving me like YA Love and Basketball, and I was just like, oh my god, yes. And Rex, who is the male main character in this like kind of romantic duo, his storyline just like was hurting my heart, and I just wanted so much better for him, and I wanted him to be happy and to be healthy and to have a good relationship with his dad, because I just feel like everybody should read this book. It's just so well executed, and I also love the ending. It's a little bit more realistic than your typical YA ending where it's all flowers and roses at the end. Liara Tamani gives you an ending that is like, that is representative of the fact that like not everything gets tied together with a bow, and that's okay. But it also feels finished. It doesn't feel like, you know, those books where things just end and you're just like, okay, but like, hello, what's going on? I really, really, really love this book, definitely. So those are my top YA picks for 2020. So we're on book 16 now. Altogether, I've done 16 books. So the last 4 are going to be my romance picks. So let's do that. Romance picks. This one was not that hard for me because I said this before, I had a lot of duds this year. I had a lot of romance that I really, really loved. A lot of them I read on my Kindle, but the romance that was my favorite books, this is not going to be a surprise to anybody who's watched my channel or even follows me on Instagram, because like, y'all know, you guys, I'm sure as you are about to start this, you already know what I'm about to say, what my favorite romance is. But let me start with, wait, should I start with the ones that are like my standout picks, or should I start with the 2 other ones? Okay, no. Let me start with the 2 other ones that I classify them as romance, but I'm sure, okay, the first one is A Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. It is Greek mythology, yes. It is, I think, contemporary fiction or literary fiction. I don't really know what the difference is other than bougie level. But the romance for for me, I think Achilles and Patroclus' story is essentially a romance novel. Like, that's for me how I read it. So that's how I classified. That's where it's sitting on my shelf for the rest of the romance books. This love story, guys, Achilles is my favorite problematic fave in Greek mythology. This book is so well written, and I love the fact that this book went for the love angle between Achilles and Patroclus, because a lot of the time it's his cousin Hunny, it's his friend, it's his best friend. Like, Achilles was gay, guys. Let's just accept it. It is what it is. Brad Pitt, they didn't want to let Brad Pitt be with a man, but like, guys, please, Achilles was gay. So this book, I think this is one of the books that made me cry the most this year. Yeah, the book that made me cry the most as well. My heart was broken. I wanted a different ending than what I got. I know how the story of Achilles ends because I did classics in varsity. I also like love Greek mythology, but I wished Madeline Miller had just given us the happily ever after, brah, had not killed everybody. I wish she'd just gone away from the actual retelling, the actual classic story, and actually given us a happy ending, because I would have loved to see Patroclus and Achilles raising a little baby, because that would have been everything. So this book, definitely. The other one is my favorite series of life. It is Archangel's War by Nalini Singh. This is classified as, I think, fantasy romance or romance fantasy. Perfect. I don't say much about this series because it's my favorite series, and I don't like to talk about this series because if anybody says anything bad, I'm going to have to fly to where you are so we can fight, and really I just don't have the energy for that. I'm not trying to collect corona, but this is my favorite series of life by Nalini Singh. I've said this before, she's my favorite writer. Archangel's War is basically the culmination of like 13 books of stuff. This love story between Elena and Raphael is like 13 books deep. It is everything. He's an archangel. She's a bounty hunter, a guild hunter. They love each other. Like, she makes him more human. He's a badass. She's a badass. And I love this book because it's basically the culmination of all the other books in terms of like the epic war that they fight. So Archangel's Son, which is the next book in the series, I've already ordered it. It just literally is arriving, I think, in like 2 weeks. It is like the next leg of the journey because this is the final battle, and I think now we're moving on to other couples and other romances and kind of trying out different things within the same universe. So I'm excited about that. But this was perfect. It was a perfect close out to a lot of storylines that were going for the other 12 books, and also the romance, as I said, top. It's steamy. The steam level in this book is it's top 2, not number 2. Okay, so the top 2 romance books of 2020, which will round out this top 20 of 2020, should come as no surprise to anybody who watches me regularly. And that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and Take a Hit, Daniel Brown by Talia Hibbert. Obviously, you know, this one is my favorite. I've been going back and forth, but I did tell you guys that this was like my second best romance of the year. But Get a Life, Chloe Brown is my favorite. It is perfect. Redford is perfect. What's this guy's name? Zaf is perfect. Danny is perfect. Freaking Chloe is perfect. Everything about this series is perfect. Talia Hibbert is like my favorite romance writer right now. I can't wait for the 3rd book in this series. What is it called? At Your Age, Eve Brown. I can't wait for the 3rd book. These 2 books are perfect. The steamy level is perfect. The romance is perfect. The characters are all going through some shit, and it's just like, but the love, and it's just, this one I think is steamier. If you're looking for a steamy book, this one, like, Zaf is like, whoop. But this one, guys, Redford is like the perfect husband, perfect boyfriend, perfect everything. I relate to this book a lot more. And I keep saying this, guys, I'm going to manifest a redheaded husband, a tall redheaded husband. Like, it was the last thing I do, manifesting it. Like, I'm going to do it. So yeah, these are the last 2, and they're my favorite. So that's the end of this video. That is my top 20 of 2020 books. Wow, guys, it's been an insane year for books. Like, I think I've read so many books this year because I've been trying to escape the chaos of the Rona. But this year has been phenomenal for me for reading. I am so grateful to everybody who subscribes to my channel. And if you don't already subscribe, I don't know what you're waiting for. I'm so grateful to all of you who watch these videos and who engage with me in the comments. I have such a good time reading your comments and talking to you guys about books. This has been such a great thing to do this year, and I can't wait to start 2021, pump out more videos more regularly, hopefully, guys. I'm trying to get my scheduling under control, so please give me a chance. But I can't wait to have more videos, read more books, and really just engage with you guys a lot more in 2021. So thank you so much for watching this video. Again, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video, jump in the comments and let me know if any of these were on your top 20 of 2020, if you're looking forward to reading any of these. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram on @prettybookish if you want to engage with me on a more like regular basis, because that's where I am most of the time. Thank you so much for watching this video. Happy New Year. I hope you guys have a really great end of 2020 and start 2021 with a bang. Thank you. Love you guys.